is Michael Amos. I'm talking about the organisation that I run, Waste to Wonder, but I also live in Bilton Marsh, so about 6 minutes away. And up until May this year, I was a town councillor for 7 or 8 years. And when Jamie sort of first approached me and said she wanted, originally was going to be sort of a hop themed, hence it being in October because COP30 is about to kick off in Brazil. And I love the fact that it's been brought down to the Sustainable Westbury and the individual actions that we can all take to address climate change. Where we're, that's okay. Where we, the angle that we come from climate change is much more the macro. So Waste to Wonder is the largest ethical clearance and reuse social enterprise in Europe. We work mostly with large corporate clients, so IBM, Citibank, HSBC, those types of organizations, to manage the ethical reuse of their redundant office furniture and equipment. So we clear office buildings of desks and chairs, beds and cupboards, kitchen equipment, plant and machinery, and rather than it go the historic route, which was landfill, and more recent route, recycling, we seek to achieve a huge amount of social impact by getting that equipment to disadvantaged communities around the world. So I wanted to start with, I suppose, a quick origin story of Waste to Wonder. We've been operating for 23 years. So we started in 2002. My father-in-law, Alan, ran a logistics company, traditional move management logistics company based out of Bristol. And I was backpacking from Australia, traveling around Europe, and had recently started dating his daughter. 23 years on, that relationship is still strong. We are married and have a child now. Alan pitched to a large company, BP, who were clearing out of a site in Hemel Hempstead. They had 800 seating positions worth of furniture. So that's 800 desks, 800 pedestals, 800 chairs, hundreds of cupboards, a vast amount of furniture. At the time, the standard approach for an office clearance of that type would be to take everything to landfill. He saw the commercial opportunity to offer a greener solution, and his pitch to them was, this stuff's too good to chuck away. Surely we can find a home for it, and anything we can't find a home from a charitable perspective, we'll recycle. So we'll have zero to landfill. We anticipated 80–90% recycling, and hopefully we could donate as much as we could to local schools and charities. So we collected all this furniture. They awarded us the project, called our bluff, if you will, and we had 40 container loads worth of office furniture stacked up at Avonmouth Docks. And that's when I started with the organisation. So I was effectively the first charity coordinator. My job was to ring every school and charity in the region. This obviously covers Wiltshire, Bath, and Hemel Hempstead as well, and find a home for furniture. So I was ringing, this probably dates a little bit, but I went on yell.com and I was Googling schools near me and ringing the school. We've got some fantastic furniture, you can have it free of charge. We can get it down to you, you can come and collect. The problem with local donations is local schools and charities typically want 10 somethings, not 800 somethings. So whilst we were donating furniture and equipment, it was relatively slow going, but still it was going. So after about 14 weeks, we were paying to store this stuff. So we were watching the profit diminish from this ethical clearance project. We still had about half the containers left. And then through divine intervention, serendipity, luck, call it what you will, we were introduced to a gentleman called Ahmed Shabouni. He's retired now, but he was a professor of education at the University of Marrakesh in Morocco. He founded a charity which still exists called CDRT, Centre of Development for the Region of Tensift. And they were tackling an issue that, for cultural and religious reasons, young women in rural communities, if they didn't have a secondary school and didn't have a male relative who could accompany them to somewhere that did have a secondary school, their education would stop around 12, 13 years of age. What he was doing was identifying underutilized government buildings and converting them into secondary schools, so bringing the education to these young girls. We said, we've got some fantastic furniture. We can populate some of these schools with furniture and equipment if you can fundraise for the shipping cost. He phoned back about a week and a half later. Bear in mind, I've been getting rid of 10 chairs, 5 cupboards at a time. And he asked us how many container loads we had left. At the time, we had 17 container loads. Each container holds about 18 tons of furniture, so a significant amount of furniture. And the King of Morocco actually agreed to fund 17 container loads worth of shipping costs to get those 17 containers out to 17 rural schools in the high Atlas mountain regions of Morocco. So that was the foundation of what is now our international program, School in a Box, box being a very large shipping container. That program has expanded now, and we've now equipped over 1,500 schools in 47 countries. So we've got schools throughout Africa, right down into Malaysia and the Philippines, India, Haiti, following the earthquake, making use of equipment that's come out of the corporate clients' sites that we've been working with. So in doing that, in redistributing these items, we started seeing the flip side of the coin in terms of the circular economy and sustainability messaging. There's a phrase, I'm not sure, just by way of show of hands, who's heard of ESG as a concept? Okay, so 10, 15 years ago, ESG would have been called CSR, corporate social responsibility. The Americans typically called it corporate citizenship, but it was how organizations conduct their business in a sustainable or ethical way. ESG was then coined really as a risk mitigation initiative. So it was for large organizations seeking large investment, and it was a measure. It was a calculation to work out whether that particular organization, if it had a strong ESG score, which is environmental, social, and governance, then that was a worthwhile investment. It has now become sort of a global corporate message for how organizations are perceived and how they conduct themselves. We started really as a waste minimization program. This stuff was way too good to chuck away. Surely someone can use it. How do we find a home for this equipment? Once we started doing that, and when we started, obviously with the School in a Box program, and for me personally, my first visit to a recipient country was Ghana in 2005. And I flew up, again, I was in my early 20s, flew into Accra, then an internal flight up to Tamale, and then a 4-hour drive on a dirt road up to Bolgatanga, which is the most northerly town below Burkina Faso. And we donated furniture to an orphanage and a number of schools. And in my early 20s, I saw the impact that this furniture was having, not just in terms of education, but in terms of pride. The young people there, they would turn up to school. Bear in mind that this was dirt roads. In some schools, they didn't even have a concrete floor, it was dirt floors, and their uniforms would be immaculate. And when we put this furniture into these schools, in many cases, it was the first furniture they'd ever had in these schools. And I think it was at that moment that we understood the social value of doing things from a sustainable perspective. So for us, our mission over the last 23 years has really been to marry the environmental messaging with the social impact messaging when it comes to reuse. So our strapline as a business is challenging the perception of waste, and our real mission with certainly with corporate clients is to move the needle. So the benchmark for a lot of organizations, and this is true of households as well, but there is a misconception that if we no longer need something, it must be waste. How do I sustainably dispose of it? That's the best case scenario in many cases. Obviously, you know, I no longer need it, must be waste, chuck it out. That's the really negative approach. But even an argument, more positive approach is how do I recycle it responsibly? We want to move the needle to a baseline of assumed reuse, certainly when it comes to corporate furniture and equipment, because we know that it's not a piece of waste. It's a desk, it's a chair, it's social impact, it's an opportunity for a young person to have a better chance at life through better education. We then looked at, and I think the phrase has come up, ripple effects, has come up a couple of times today. And this has been a 2.5 decade long learning journey for us. But the ripple effects that we've now been taught in doing what we do at Waste to Wonder is that it's also impacting reducing the risk of modern slavery. Two of the biggest drivers for modern slavery is extreme poverty and low literacy levels. So if we're equipping schools and charities in the developing world with education and with the ability to have greater literacy levels, we're empowering these communities, to recognize the risks of modern trafficking and modern slavery, and also build resilience against that. It has benefits in terms of climate change. Our latest project, so the extension of the School in a Box initiative, we then started funding solar-powered bore wells in the Gambia, because we noticed that young kids were walking past school during school hours. And I asked the question, why are these kids not in school? And the answer, which this was 3 years ago, was that their village doesn't have water. So the priority for their family wasn't, what grades they're going to get in school. It was, the food that we're going to eat, the sanitation, the water we can drink to live. So again, ripple effects. We did a large project for British Airways. So the company that was supplying the new furniture and equipment approached us. They're actually a long-term partner of ours, and said, we've got all this fantastic furniture. Now the furniture, if you've ever been in a BA lounge, is quite large, bulky sofa type furniture. There's privacy pods and various other things. Not super usable from an educational classroom basis, and certainly not appropriate for some of the classrooms in some of the schools we support. The charity that we supported, the Global Orphan Empowerment Academy, actually approached us and said, we'd like to sell some of these to put a couple of bore wells in. And our view initially was, that's a bit of a disconnect from the education. But when they explained this is the reason the kids aren't going to school, we saw the social impact value of that. That's now expanded. So we've now funded 27 solar powered bore wells. Each bore well provides enough safe drinking water for around 2,000 people. So that's almost 60,000 people every day can access safe drinking water so their kids can attend school. Ripple effect. A lot of these communities, for the first time ever, are now growing crops and having excess crops. One of the schools we visited, a vocational college in the Gambia, has had a large school building, about 80% complete. They'd had some money from an American church, and the money had gone into building this classroom, but had run out. And that money had been spent around 2018. It was 2022, I think, we were in the Gambia for that trip. And my original thought, because where we do the large clearances, was we get, there's a camera somewhere, we get commercial kitchens as well, so large commercial kitchens. So I thought, well, let's fundraise to finish the classroom, let's put in commercial kitchens, and let's create a cookery school. We then had some feedback from the recipient that because this is a government-owned school and government corruption can be a real problem in West Africa, we then took the decision, we've actually bought a plot of land. We're building the sustainability cookery school from scratch. So ripple effects, this is a huge departure from where we first started, which was this stuff's way too good to chuck away, surely someone can use it, to now having a cookery school that's going to have 140 young people learning sustainable agriculture. But I think the baseline with all of this, and this is true for us as families, as well as everyone in this room is part of a supply chain. We're either consumers, we're buying products, we're using products. If we do run businesses, we're buying and selling products and services. And I think the baseline understanding of the materials that we're using is that before you think about recycling, can it deliver some social impact value first? Obviously, ultimately, those materials have to go back into a supply chain. That's the best case of a circular economy model. We're actually zooming out a little bit and talking about a spherical economy, which basically covers on the who, focuses on the who, not just the what. And that can be looked at in terms of pure materials acquisition. So if you're talking about mining, the raw materials, the manufacturing process, the use of the items and the disposal of the items, that's the circular economy. The spherical economy is if you're mining, if you're chopping down trees, if you're mining raw materials, who is doing that? What's the impact that's having on their lives? From a manufacturing point of view, things like fair trade comes into that. So paying people a fair wage to work the fields. From a built environment perspective, the buildings that we live, work, are born and die in, who's using those spaces and what's the social impact for them? And then, of course, from an end of life perspective, in terms of materials, our view is try and maximize the social impact that can be realized before those raw materials go back into the supply chain. I'm just looking at the time. I do have a short little video I wanted to share. So this is a school in Ghana. Almost all the places we've ever supported from a school in the box perspective, we're still supporting. So this is a school in Accra, Ghana that I visited this year, Kotababi School. And I thought, if we can, I'll just press play. Cool. And this just gives you a little bit of a flavour of the who.
I didn't want to insist. Just 1 moment, please.
At Waste to Wonder Worldwide, we believe empowered young people are the greatest advocates for their own potential. We visited the Koto Valley School in Ghana to find out from the students there what they need and what we can do to help them achieve their goals.
I am Abdul Muhammad, and I am the school person of Ghana University teachers. So I, as a student, we face challenges here in my school. We lack furniture, which is the whiteboard and desk that we sit. And as you can see, we are sitting in three, which should be two. So the first benefit is that increased visibility. We're able to see what the teacher is teaching, writing on the boards, and also correct push down. When two people or one person sitting on the desk, the person can sit down, which can correct the person's push down. I'll say thank you to Waste to Wonder. I'll say thank you to them so that they continue with what they are doing. When they help the students are the push of the mission. So when they are helping the students, they are also helping the mission.
If you want to be an agent for change and help these young people and thousands like them around the world, get in touch with Waste to Wonder Worldwide to find out more. So one of the things that came up earlier is obviously the storytelling, and that's actually, so the storyline bit that was the logo that's at the bottom of that video was something that we're super proud of the big numbers. So we've, as I say, 1,500 schools, 47 countries. We've now donated, it was actually, we achieved this last year, but over 1 million furniture items have actually been donated to good causes. And the estimate is about 1.5 million children have been impacted through the programs. The problem that we have from a storytelling point of view is the scale at the other end. So every year, $100 billion US worth of new furniture is procured every year. 5 to 15% of that furniture every year is retired for a range of reasons. Yeah, it's reached the end of its corporate life, or it's tax efficient to get rid of because companies can then spend money and get tax breaks and tax benefits for buying new capital items. So where we donate roughly 2,500 tons of furniture a year, which is a vast quantity, it's still only a drop in a pool of the ocean of the problem. So that's where the storyline, the storytelling, it becomes really important to us. Obviously, I mentioned the Borewell project and the young people who are now going to school because they can access water. One of the stories that I tell, Keta is a gentleman that we were privileged to meet on the first visit to the Gambia. So he was appointed by Marie and Amadou Gillen, who run the charity that we support, to be our driver to collect us each day because we were visiting multiple schools and hospitals and seeing the impact of the project. Lovely man, 66 years old at the time. He's got 11 children, 5 of them his, but he's also, his brothers died, and you sort of adopt their family as part of the culture there. And when we started doing the Borewell project, Marie asked if we could put one of the Borewells in his village. And of course we said yes. When we went out last time, we went and visited Keta's village, and the Borewell had gone in the October, we were there in the March. So in that 5-6 month time span, his whole community was benefiting. So he had a tap within his compound and he had a tap on the outside, so everyone else in the village could come and access water. These bore wells, just for those who don't know, it's basically a massive tank on a big set of metal stilts, solar powered, so with a pump. So it sucks up water from the artisanal wells underneath during the day, and at night it's gravity fed. So it's a permanent water source. One of the real problems they have in the Gambia, because it's coastal, hand dug wells don't go down deep enough, so the water's really salty and brackish. So not only is it not safe to drink, it's not good for crops. So agriculture is really suffering. So anyway, Keta, when we visit him, 67 years old, and for the first time in his life can turn on a tap and access safe water. And that obviously really deeply touched us, not only because we knew Keta and loved Keta, and he's a wonderful man, but yeah, that was 2023. And in 2023, to have someone be in the 7th decade of their life, and that's the first time they can access safe drinking water. That's where those personal stories are really important. And I think that really sort of segues onto the project that we've been working on with these amazing young people at the front. We did a project for the University of East London's. They have a big campus at Docklands near London City Airport, if you know it, where we cleared a number of buildings over about 18 months. And one of the buildings they converted into a centre for sustainability. So we actually fully populated the new building with 3 floors worth of Second Life furniture. As part of that process, we were then introduced to Chelsea College of Art, University Arts London, and we started speaking to Nadine, who ran, this is a first-year product design course. And was it Hayley? I think it was you. Someone came up with a brilliant idea to donate mixed pieces of furniture to the design students with a view that we'd create a competition, and the brief was to take 3 different types of bits of furniture, desks, beds, cupboards, hat stands, you name it, and create a new piece of furniture. So it couldn't be an art piece. This wasn't making a fish out of 1,000 plastic bottles. This had to have function as well as form. And the idea behind that was to show that these materials are still an asset and they can still have a huge amount of additional life, but also, with all these things, is to inspire the designers of the future to consider circularity and materiality as part of their career as they move into this. So I'm just going to quickly start with an intro film. The students are then going to talk about their project. I've got a couple of questions for them as well to put them on the spot. But these guys are the winning team. It was 8 teams? It was 8 teams. So this video will explain a little bit about the initial process, and then these guys can go into their personal journeys. We see potential we see potential to reduce waste, cut carbon, and create positive impact for schools and charities across the world. We also saw potential in these items to inspire future sustainability. This is a collaboration with the University of London, their first new products and furniture. Our collaboration began here at the University of East London at the Buildbox Centre for Sustainability. A building we helped refurbish entirely and setting up office furniture. Following an ethical clearance, we carried out by our partners like materials. It was the perfect setting to introduce the students to the challenge, see the potential in redundant furniture, and transform it into something new. From the very start, their creativity shone through. At UAL, Chelsea College, we were introduced to the very first concepts: scale models, mood boards, and bold railings. The students clearly embracing the principles of sustainability, circular design, and the waste economy, turning material constraints into creative opportunities. That is why this project matters. These students are the next change makers. By fostering creativity in young people, we open the door to new ideas, new solutions, and new ways of thinking about reuse and sustainability. Fast forward a few weeks, we return to see the finished pieces, and we were completely blown away. The thought, craftsmanship, and out-of-the-box problem-solving on display were outstanding. these students didn't just reimagine furniture, they created statements of sustainable design and furniture. We were super inspired by all of the students, and especially by the winning design, striking multifunctional storage built with real flair and modern sensibility. We are so proud to play a part in these students' languages, and even more excited to see what comes next. This is just the next year we'll return with a new challenge, new furniture items, and we cannot wait to see where creativity takes us next. So, if you can give a warm welcome, please, to the students from the University of Oxford.
Good afternoon, guys. Nice to meet you. We are students from Chelsea College of Arts, majored in product and furniture design. And my name is Heidi. Hello. And we are glad to share you our collaborative project working with Waste to Wonder. And yeah, so these are the three donated furnitures that we've got at first. And then in order to investigate them, we started by observe them in different angles and try to investigate their manufacturing methods and also their product details. And then we disassembled them into pieces so that we could play with it and to see them as materials rather than furnitures.
Okay, so here we have the disassembled pieces. So these are the pieces we used, which is the chair steel legs, wooden legs, and the other steel legs from the table. So we wanted to use the chair of the steel legs, but unfortunately, the sponge was sticking to the frame really bad, so we couldn't do anything. So going with the multicultural theme, we decided to go with this theme in order to because Waste Wonder donates most of its furniture pieces to African countries. So we wanted to do something like interesting and cross-cultural. So this is our first initial theme. Our second theme was modern industrial. We decided to go with this one, so it matches more like our pieces we got. So we researched different textures, different materials, and different concepts. This is our final woodwork. So here are our team sketch ideas, where we sketched some potential ideas and possibilities. So we narrowed down the ideas into this stool, which is this one. So we made the cardboard version of this stool.
These are the three initial scale models that we presented to Waste to Wonder, and we had obviously a discussion about which one would be best, and we chose the middle one, as you can see. And this is a close-up, and we have sort of a background piece to sort of match the theme and really envision where our piece would be used. There's some more concept images of where we have sort of imagined our piece would be useful.
So in the making of it, it took quite a long time to figure out how we would join the tubes together to the wood and everything. So we just took apart the glass table that we saw at the beginning, and we bought some PVC tubes to connect it all together. And we tried to eliminate wasting more material, but I think we did a pretty good job just cutting and then connecting it all together.
So moving on to the leather pouch portion, as you can see,
It required a lot of trial and error because getting the measurements right was really difficult because basically depending on how we wanted to sew it, rather like from the outside or from the inside, it would change the measurements. So we made a scale model of the pouch, and then after like making some paper models and figuring out how the measurements would actually work, we had the leather we used was from the Leather Sellers Guild, and it was like recycled leather that we were given, and we had like a huge piece of it. So we used the measurements to cut out the leather, and then for the sewing technique.
Yeah, we trialed a couple of different ways to sort of join the leather. Obviously, more traditionally, we would go a lot more into depth, but within the time scale we had, we thought that just sewing it would be better. And the leather actually cut with a clean blade, like actually presented itself really nicely. So we decided on like an exterior seam and to like embrace that feature. And we had some sort of crisscross elements and also a running stitch. And the crisscross we preferred for the sort of aesthetic reasons, and the running stitch was more structurally sound. So we just decided to combine them both. And there's an example of it like on a corner there, envisioning how it would look on our final piece.
And the tubes actually was chrome plated, which is really bad for the environment. But so we sanded, and also when we bought the PVC tubes, we sanded it and we spray painted all of it, and we spray painted with a water-based spray paint, which is good for the environment.
Connecting wooden legs to the frame and cleaning hole in wooden legs and match holes with metal tubes. And we use French oak to testing different wood strengths and dial, and decide on use screws or washers.
Okay, so this just shows a little bit of our making process. For the frame, we measured the diameter, we did the sanding fittings, we assembled the frame, and then you can see how we like set on the primer and did the spray painting. And then for the legs, you can see us cutting and sanding the top to make it straight, cutting off the legs for the same length, and then gluing and clipping the legs and the legs. And then we used the wood stain, like she said, to kind of give it a more industrial and like nice looking finish. And then you can see us screwing on the metal legs.
So this is more of the leather work. We have our initial top cushion, which is actually able to fit on either side. So you can really like customize the way you want it to look and choose where you want it. And then there's this secondary like hanging pouch in which you can store books or like anything really. Yeah, and so as this is just one piece, we decided to line the edges with the matching stitching to tie them both together. And it was interesting to sort of figure out how to wrap it around the pole and fit it on, you know, so that they both fit together. These are some images of our final outcome. I think it turned out great. As you can see, we added a wooden support beam because it was like a bit shaky, but we actually ended up matching the stain, and I actually think it makes it look a lot better, and it cinches in this pouch as well, sort of gives it more structure, which I think is really nice. Anyone else want to say anything? Oh, reflecting back on production and sustainability, the key considerations, the supply chain challenges, Sourcing the materials, such as the wooden legs and the metal joints, would require consideration of sustainable supply chains and local manufacturing options to minimize transport emissions. But we could use reclaimed or certified timber, could support circular design principles and reduce the product's environmental impact. A lot of our materials are sort of easily replaceable. We sort of just have, you know, bits of wood and metal tubes. So it could easily be sourced from lots of different waste products.
Okay, and then we tried to do a little life cycle analysis. So we thought that the main environmental hotspots were the metal tubes, because metal has the highest impact on the environment due to the energy intensive production it has. And then the beech wood has a moderate impact. The recycled leather, obviously lower impact than virgin leather, but it is still difficult to recycle. And then our key findings were the most emissions come from metal production and transport. The design for disassembly. So in order to design for disassembly, we used screws instead of glue, which improves the recyclability. And using recycled materials and responsibly sourced wood reduces footprint. And then for the end of life scenario, the metal parts are pretty easily recyclable. The wood is reusable or compostable since it's untreated wood. And the leather, like I said, difficult to recycle, but it can be downcycled or reused in any different way. Yeah, thank you so much for watching.
So we do a lot of work with the interior design and fit out and furniture manufacturing sector. They're natural partners for us. And I asked one of the designers at Frost Design, which is a big soft seating manufacturer up in the Midlands. And their typical R&D design for a product is 1 to 2 years before they can bring it to market. And of course, they have a blank sheet, so they can use whatever materials, design, layout as they like. These guys had three banged up bits of furniture, and they produced something which I think is absolutely beautiful. So well done, guys. What I really loved about this project as well, they had the choice in the 3 pieces of furniture that each team received, and it was a complete mixed bag across all of the A9 teams. And what I loved is that there was basically a bartering system, because some people had glass and they needed glass, but some people had fabric and wood and timber and all this sort of stuff. So it was wonderful to see the wheeling and dealing. Are you going to use that? Oh, I can use that. And I think that was fantastic as well. I mean, obviously, we've been super impressed. The creativity, the passion, but also the depth of intellectual awareness that they've shown in terms of understanding the materiality and the recyclability and stuff like that. So I think you guys have done UAL incredibly proud, and we are incredibly proud to have been part of this project. We have a couple of Bath Spa University guys here, yeah. So we're just about to read the program, but with Bath Spa as well. And actually, it's up in Edinburgh, and so Edinburgh University is also looking at doing something similar as well. So I think, in fairness, everyone at every stage of life has a responsibility in terms of climate change. But if we can get it done, that's where we want to go. I do have just a couple of quick questions, and then I'll throw it out to you. I'm sure there's plenty of questions. Firstly, you've answered a lot of the things I was thinking about. But what were your biggest challenges in terms of this project?
I think the initial challenges was figuring out like the structure, I'd say. Obviously we have the addition of the wood panel to help it be more supportive, but it's sort of hard to like add too many new elements with what we had. And also we had a big glass table, which was awful. And obviously pieces like that, it's very buts, ifs and maybes. Like we don't know if when we try and cut it, if it's just going to shatter. So I feel like we used the most reliable materials and we had to work with them.
I think also definitely time was a bit of an issue. We had how many weeks? did we have?
11, I think. 11 or 12?
Was it?
Or maybe,
I don't know.
that's funny when we started with the team.
And
Yeah.
like one day when because we were kind of in charge of the leather parts, and like we had run out of string and the shop was closed, and like we had to get it done, and like just a lot of like improvising and like everything, and also like sewing the like leather around the tubes was really hard because we had to like it was like basically like playing Twister, like we had to like bend over and do all of that. So that was, I would say, a challenge for sure.
That's what I was going to say. We were sort of intermediate with the piece, trying to sew the leather on, and also like someone screwing the other side.
Yeah.
Putting the patches on and around it. It was like very hectic.
There wasn't a lot of time between
No.
when we decided, when we said which one, when we kind of had a look at them and saw which one we should go with. There wasn't about 4 weeks.
Oh, yeah, between,
I think it
scale
was like
model.
3.
Obviously, we have to take off the initial scale models, and then that's the shows. We didn't actually have that much time to make it and figure out any problems, really.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So just one final question, and then again, I'll throw it out to the audience. But so if you had a time machine and you could go back to yourselves at the beginning of this project, what's the one piece of advice you'd give?
I mean, I would say, I think we did this pretty well, to be honest, but I'd say just like being like open-minded. I think the thing that worked really well for us was that we actually worked really well as a group. Like, I think we all I felt like we all put in, you know, a good amount of work, and we were all open to like hearing out each other's ideas and going with what's actually going to be best, rather than like, oh, this is my idea and I want to do this. So I think just like being open and like listening to others' reasonings why they want to do certain things, that was really helpful for us.
I think I would say like we were sometimes hesitant if we should do this or not. So just go ahead and start making. So don't be hesitant and take time. Like in deciding, just start making. That's my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you. Right. Do you guys have any questions? Dan at the back. Yep.
What was the
I think like making, because we all distributed like the work with what we specialize in and what we know how to do. So it's like the making rather than like researching and like the first part of the process. So I think making.
I think the best part for me was at the end when we sort of got all of our separate elements and like combined them all within the space of like 2 hours, and then taking that first seat and it not collapsing was pretty nice. Yeah, it's sittable. So
Yeah, come and try.
Can I ask, where do you think this seat might be used? What kind of content for it?
I think it's quite small, so I think it's really good. The name of it is the perch. So in like maybe like a hallway or a transitional space. It could also be used in a living room, like at the side maybe. I think it's a very good addition piece because it's got storage. I think it could work in a lot of places really. But I think, yeah, obviously as a stool, I think my favorite one personally was the idea of it being a hallway bench. Because you could use the pouch to store shoes or something. The hang one also works well for shoes. If you want to say anything. Yeah.
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 You're obviously describing it being used in a residential.
Yeah.
Is that something you've ever thought of before? Taking furniture from offices?
But we have. It's more about volume. So obviously we're collecting truckloads worth of stuff and then finding a home. I think doing things on a 2 items, 5 items, 3 items operationally could be very challenging. Yeah, exactly. But no, it's and you can see from this picture actually they're modular. So that seat pad can be moved over to this side, so you could use that for blankets and all sorts of things. So it's really, really clever design. I think there was a question at the back. Question?
You mentioned about landscape and Laverton and Crow.
What opinions do you have on the commercial furniture that you were dealing with?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so the commercial furniture, commercial
Yeah.
office furniture that you were dealing with, what was your opinion of the type of material and the way that it's put together?
I mean, to be honest, I think we were trying not to form an opinion, and we were like just trying to like it and go with it, because we didn't like, even if we didn't like what we had to use it, right? So we tried to see like the best of everything. Like we tried to see like how we could use every single element, and the ones that worked out the most was what we went with, because we really thought about what we could do with the glass. But I think like we just couldn't come up with any way to like remove like the circle bit over there without it breaking, or like cut it in any way. So that's why we kind of ended up going with the elements like Galia said as well. The chair with steel, we really wanted to use that as well, but the foam would not come out. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah.
I had an opinion and I hated the grey chair. It's actually like I think a £500 chair, which was quite interesting. And it was really interesting to see how, even though it's worth so much money, how just like plainly it's made. Like it's just got this structure, and the main support of the chair was like these seatbelt materials that was weaved, and that was a nightmare. And it was all just, obviously it's spray foam, but I just, in my opinion, thought that a chair so expensive would be made of like with more thought. Yeah. Yes, it was very old. The table was also not structurally stable. It was very wobbly. I think the tabletop was too big for the base. So sort of using the table as is wasn't really an option, because it wasn't very good in itself anyway.
So as a garden designer, I often spend my time deciding up gardens. You learn. Have you found by doing this now, you learn that actually sometimes feel that you're a better designer than them, because you can immediately see the faults of all of those 3 pieces of furniture. Bad design makes you sad. And obviously, clearly, those are overpriced bad design. On the left, they haven't thought about its end of life. On the right, it doesn't do its job. So do you think that will make you better designers in the future, analysing other people's work?
I think definitely, yeah. Like, I feel like if I was to make a chair and it was charged £500 for it, I feel like I'd at least want them to be able to, like the back as well, it's flexible, which is great, but it's also like not great, because that could break, and it was really thin too. So like say a child putting a bit of pressure on that, it would have broken that. And I think if I'm charging somebody that much, I would definitely want it to be a bit safer.
I think it's about like learning from other people's mistakes. So I think we would have like some also mistakes which later on designs will figure it out. So yeah.
In the UK, I think there's been a requirement for a number of years to make most vehicles more and more recycled. Do you think, from your experience, you might be able to write some sort of briefing note to the furniture manufacturing industry on how to make their furniture more recycled?
So I'll jump in just quickly. So Orange Box is a really good office chair manufacturer. They brought out their first 100% recyclable office chair about 20 years ago. But something's only recyclable if you recycle it. And a number of those chairs that ended up in skips because people didn't send it for recycling meant that that was literally just a buzzword and a bit of a branding exercise. So it's about the intent as well as the product, I think.
Yeah. Back. Yeah.
What percentage you actually did have to get rid of?
What percentage of what we had did we have to get rid of? Probably like 50.
Yeah, obviously the top of the glass was useless to us. Also the white part of the white chair, we sort of used the legs And then the fabric of the grey chair we didn't use, but we actually used obviously the inside frame, but we used the legs and the foam. So that was probably what we used the most. Did anyone? No, I don't think. I don't think so. Everyone had better bits than us.
And you won. And you won. Fantastic. Yes.
For myself, so given that they won and well done, I did feel like what were the valuable points for you? How would you be judging what were the pros?
Yeah. So as I say, one of the core parts of the brief had to have function, not just form. We didn't just want a pretty art piece. It had to have a second life as an object. Using as much of the materials as possible was obviously a core part of it. And also, I personally like the idea that you could see elements of the original product in this design, which if you come up and have a look, you can actually see individual components, the tubes, they're the legs from that chair, the outer legs are the legs from the table, the chair and stuff like that. So I think that's really great to be able to tell the story of the old product and the new. Okay.
I have to say, having seen the other entrance, as it were, you can't understate how amazing the work was. It seems here, they've actually made it seem relatively simple. And it's complex, and what the other teams did was equally as good.
Yeah.
How they ever decided that.
You could have had 5 winners. Yeah, it was.
They were absolutely. I think the extra little bits of design, like the stitching and the
Yes.
in it, that design. And so functionality of it was.
Paula had a preference for anything you could store wine in, didn't she? That had built-in wine rack. But yeah. Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. Well done. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Hello. I feel like I might be repeating or sort of going over a couple of things that other people said, but we'll consider those like lovely spoilers, because if I deviate from what I've written down, I'll lose my train and it will be a disaster. So you're just going to have to listen to what I've prepared, even if it feels like we've been there already. So hello, my name's Drury Shore. I'm a freelance sustainability consultant and advocate. I'm also the chairperson at Sustainable Devices. First of all, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here and be inspired by the solutions-focused conversation and cool design stuff. Amazing. In terms of what I'm going to talk about today, I'll give you a bit of background about me and how I got into this work, just really briefly. And then we'll look at the why part of the problem, why our consumption habits are such bad news in terms of polluting the environment, contributing to climate change, and there's a sort of ethical justice piece in there too. All in all, it's pretty dystopian, so I'm not going to dwell too long on that part of it. But yeah, so I think it is important to have a grounding in why this stuff matters. So I can't skip it all together, but the positive side of looking at waste and consumption is there are solutions within reach. You do have agency, and I think that's actually pretty empowering. So I'm going to spend most of my time with you focused on what we can do, and just a quick run through of the depressing stuff first. Okay, so before that, a little bit about me. These are some of the places that I've worked over the years. I've done a lot of different things: printing, publishing, e-commerce, events. But the thread that runs through all of these roles is problem solving. I am at heart a problem solver. And the way I see it, the climate crisis is arguably the biggest problem humanity's ever faced. So I decided to turn my energy there. Alongside these various day jobs, I've been involved with volunteer groups over the years, mainly in the climate and environment space. I moved to Devices in 2020, and one of the first things I did was look up the local climate group in the hope of meeting some like-minded people. That group was Sustainable Devices, and 5 years later, I'm now the chair and have a bunch of awesome and inspiring friends and get to quiet my climate anxiety by taking climate action. So that was definitely a good move. To say a little bit more about Sustainable Devices, we're a volunteer group working on community scale climate solutions and visioning a greener future for our town. We work on all sorts of projects across the broad themes of biodiversity, cycling, food, energy and waste. We've organised events like We've organised events like swap shops, film screenings, bike rides, community meals, trash art workshops, and plenty more besides. We run Devices Community Fridge, and we've recently launched a community listening project. We try to focus on engaging people with events where they can also enjoy themselves, because we found that, in my experience, telling people off doesn't really help. Okay, this is the little bit where we talk about the big bad of climate change. I could stand here and throw endless horrible statistics at you, and I'm sure you've heard enough of them over the past several years. The bottom line to all of them being, we are making our planet uninhabitable for our species, which, given that there's no planet B, is not an ideal situation. And just to cover it off, moving to Mars is a dreadful idea. All the good stuff is here. Everyone and everything you've ever cared about is here. But this "we're all doomed" framing doesn't help. It doesn't move us towards where we need to be. I mean, how are you feeling looking at that? Terrified, powerless, cross with me for making you think about it? Talking about the problem, or talking exclusively about the problem, isn't motivating. It freaks people out, and we bypass the solutions phase and go straight to shutdown and despair. And that's why I'm trying to be as solutions focused as possible. I think most people have a fairly good grasp of the ways in which our current lifestyles and systems are contributing to the climate crisis, whether that's making energy with, making energy with fossil fuels, powering our transport with fossil fuels, or even our industrial agricultural systems where we're tearing down the rainforest to grow soy, to feed cattle, and fertilizing our soils with fossil fuels, and so on. It might be less obvious how the stuff in our lives is also part of the problem. So here are some statistics that I don't like. And I'm focusing specifically on clothing and fashion here, but it's a really similar story for most of the products that are sort of integral part of our daily lives. Essentially what we're looking at here is an industry that produces a huge amount of carbon emissions. That's more than the aviation and shipping industries combined. It creates loads of pollution, uses a massive amount of water and other resources, and in many cases is exploiting workers. And all of that's just the making of the clothes before we even think about what happens to them after we're done wearing them. Fast fashion's especially awful, as the clothes are cheaply and shoddily made, designed to fall apart after just a couple of washes. And new collections are coming out so frequently that the idea of clothes being last season is spinning ever faster. It's out of control. Lost my place, sorry. The result is mountains of wasted clothing. Much of this gets shipped to developing countries. That includes clothes donated to charity shops that don't sell. These poor quality clothes are absolutely flooding second-hand markets like Cantamanto in Accra, Ghana. The UK sent 57,000 tons of fashion waste to Ghana in 2024. Millions of garments arrive there every day. Local officials estimate that 40% of the clothing arriving in Ghana is unsaleable. Even the slightly better quality stuff, there's just so much of it. Inevitably, much of the clothing is just discarded. Beaches there are covered in clothes. Rivers are choked with clothes, our clothes. In the Atacama Desert in Chile, a similar problem. There's a mountain of clothes you can literally see from space. And we live in a world of convenience, right? I get that. We're all busy, we're all exhausted. You need a thing, you go online, you buy the thing, a couple of days later it arrives at your door. It's basically magic, right? Or you've had a crap day, so you treat yourself to a new t-shirt. It costs a few quid. But as we've seen, the cost isn't just financial, it's environmental and it's human. Okay, quick check-in. How are we feeling? Bit sick? I'm sorry. I've done some nice scenery. I've done a pause for us to look at something pleasant. That is enough of the horrible stuff. We don't want to be a part of that system anymore. Many of the changes we need to make are systemic. They are at the infrastructure level. So the hands on the levers of change are not mine and they're not yours. We get to the, what can I as one person possibly do? And the good news is there's loads of stuff and a lot of it will save you money and a lot of it is something else that I've written down. A lot of it is fun, that's what I was going to say. So we're winning all the way down. yes, we absolutely need big, bold action from those in positions of power. Of course we do. We can't let them off the hook. But we're a bit late for all. It's an and. We need everything. We need everyone to do what they can. I'd like to talk now, you might have heard this earlier, about the circular economy. And you may know the basics of what this means. Mike spoke about it earlier. But it's a different way of looking at things, at the products in our lives. Most of our current systems are what we call a linear economy. It's a line: take, make, waste. So we dig something up out of the ground, or we chop down a tree, we turn it into a product, we use that product, and when we've had enough of that product, we throw it away. But we all know there's no such place as away, really. So what we're actually doing is polluting it, trashing our environment with landfills, polluting our air with incinerators, we're filling our oceans with plastic, and we're using poorer countries like their bins, which is not very cool. The circular economy tries to change that line into a loop. And at the minimum level, that can be recycling used materials into new products. Where it gets really exciting is changing the way we think about buying things and owning things completely. So we're transitioning away from the depressing bit into the good bit. Time to stop thinking of ourselves as consumers and step into your change maker era, maybe. All the solutions I'm going to talk about here are part of the circular economy or complementary to it. This is The Hierarchy of Needs by Sarah Lazarevich. Really hope I've said your name right, Sarah, fingers crossed. I thought it could be useful for us to look at some solutions using this as a framework. We'll run through some of the more individual actions and then get to the stuff which really floats my boat, which is the community scale solutions. So let's work up the hierarchy. First up is use what you have. If we all make an effort to wear our clothes for a little bit longer, it has a really positive impact. And this isn't just about shopping, but also the way we care for our clothes. So normalize wearing your clothes for as many times as you can before you wash them, especially if you work from home, like I do, like no one cares, and you have to do less laundry, big win. Repair also plays into this. As a millennial, I am woefully underskilled when it comes to practical skills like sewing, but I am learning. If you already know how to sew on a button or patch a hole in your jumper, then amazing. If not, we're going to come back to this in the community bit. If you are into the idea of hands-on creativity, consider having a go at visible mending, which Jen mentioned earlier. I mean, look at all the cool ways you can enhance your clothes instead of throwing them in the bin. So cool. Borrow is next. Again, we're going to come back to this in the community section, but one example I can share with you for borrowing clothes as an individual, fantastic app called By Rotation, where you can rent designer dresses for an event and then send them back. So in this example, cringe but true, my husband was being presented with an industry award. I don't have the kind of clothes you need to wear to an award ceremony. And if I buy something new, it's going to cost me a fortune. I'm going to wear it once and then never again. It's crazy wasteful. So I go onto By Rotation, borrow this ridiculously fancy dress from another user, just a regular person. Her name is Kate. She posts it out, I wear it, send it back again. It cost me a total of £73.70. Retail price for this dress is £435. Obviously, I need to acknowledge that having 70 quid to dress myself on one occasion comes from a place of privilege. I can't deny that, but I've still saved money and the resources from the dress I didn't buy. Kate's made herself a few quid as well. And By Rotation is just one example of what are called peer-to-peer sharing platforms. There's loads of examples out there of ways that you can borrow something for a little while instead of having to buy it. Next is Swap. This is literally my favorite community thing. We're going to come back to it in a minute. But again, thinking on an individual scale, you might think your wardrobe needs a bit of a refresh. Just reach out to some mates, see if you can, share things amongst you. You don't all have to own everything. Before automatically buying new things, let's think about sharing. Let's move on to thrift. Pretty self-explanatory. I broadened this just to be secondhand shopping, full stop. I'm dressed top to toe in a combo of Vinted, eBay and charity shop today. Feeling pretty good, not asking for feedback for anybody who wants to heckle me. Jane's not here now. Anyway, besides clothes, there's so much stuff you can buy on Vinted. You can get literally anything on there now. Like this year, aside from my 9-year-old daughter's entire wardrobe, I've bought swimming goggles, writing sets, lunch boxes, Play-Doh, phone case. We bought our coffee table from eBay and the mid-century sofa from Vinteria. Secondhand shopping, so much fun. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to find what you're looking for, but it's so much more rewarding, generally cheaper, and there's the potential to own more unique items. So it's as close to guilt-free shopping as you can get. Give it a go. Make is next. Now, I understand making your own clothes isn't everyone's cup of tea. If you start with maybe something smaller, like customizing or refreshing items you already have, you might find you get the bug. I mean, who doesn't love the sewing bee? We can also look beyond clothes to super simple stuff like baking biscuits with your kids to give as Christmas gifts instead of some utterly impersonal scented candle or whatever. I think there's actually something sort of quietly radical about choosing to make things rather than buy them, or just keeping the items we own for longer. Something sort of wholesomely rebellious about refusing to line the pockets of the ultra wealthy with your hard-earned and leaning into your own creativity instead. I know for a lot of folks, time is a huge factor in this. I'm not looking to minimize that. But if you can carve out opportunities to be creative, it can benefit your mental health too. Okay, so when we buy, we're voting with our wallets. So try to support brands that share your values. Think about longevity, quality, buy things of the best quality you can afford and things you're going to wear for a long time. There's no fabric choice that isn't problematic in one way or another, but making considered choices is a way that you can make a difference. Buy clothes that suit you rather than a mannequin and make you feel good. I really hope this isn't sounding too preachy. It's not my intention. I want this to feel full of possibility, not patronizing. So fingers crossed, striking the right tone here. It's important to remember that the system is the problem. There are ways of pushing back against that system or trying to extricate yourself from it. But you don't need to feel guilty when you don't manage it. That's not why we're here. Okay, it's community solutions time. I'm going to talk about some projects that really move the needle on these issues, generally only need a handful of people to get them off the ground, and are already established in towns like ours across the UK. First up, repair cafes. Coming back to the jumper question I mentioned earlier as time, show of hands for me, who's confident mending a hole in their jumper? Well done, good. Who isn't? Not just me, okay, good. Good crowd, okay. So, basic concept behind a repair cafe is folks who are in the first group, you might volunteer an hour or two of your time to be part of the event. And then folks in the second group, you bring along your jumper with the hole, and the folks in group A will mend it for you. The best bit, though, is it's more of a skill share and a social occasion. So the person who's mending your jumper, they show you how to do it. And then with a bit of practice, you have that skill too. It's really important to remember the second word in this title, cafe. Cake is an essential part of this initiative and should not be overlooked. So if you're more handy with a whisk than a wrench, there's still a way for you to show up and support initiatives like this. So whether that's baking a cake or just to donate as you come along or to run refreshments on the day, anything like that. Next, I'd like to talk about the idea of a library of things. This does what it says on the tin, really, and people often run them as sister projects alongside repair cafes. It's not so directly related to clothing or fashion, it's more about reducing consumption generally. So you all know what a book library is and how it works, right? You become a member, you borrow a book, you read the book and you give it back. You don't need to own the book in order to read it. And can I just take a second as well to reflect on how awesome libraries are? Like, as somebody fairly nerdy and introverted, I spent a lot of my youth in libraries. Like, such important spaces for our communities. Anyway, sorry. Yay, libraries. The point is, we can extend the logic of the library to lots of things other than books. In fact, almost anything. You need to put up a shelf, don't buy a drill, just borrow one for a day. Like, want to try a new hobby but aren't sure you're actually going to like it, borrow a ukulele or a sewing machine or a PlayStation for a bit. See how you go. They've got gazebos, carpet cleaners, garden tools, birthing pools, ice cream makers. That's a good one. Anything you're not going to use on the daily but just need for a little while. And you don't have to worry about the purchase cost or maintenance or storage. All of the burden of ownership is taken away and you just get the use of that item when you need it. The planetary advantage, of course, is that each person that borrows that drill doesn't need to buy a drill, so we don't need to use all the extra materials and energy to make all of those drills. Genius. I think in terms of nearby libraries of things, Frome would be your closest. Here, there's also Bath and Salisbury. I think Westbury Library of Things has a nice ring to it, if anybody fancies, mull it over. lastly, I'll take us on to a project that I know works in small market towns in Wiltshire because I'm running it. I'd like to talk to you for a little bit about devices swap shops. I'm going to beg your patience here a little bit because it's literally my favorite thing in the world to talk about. So I'm probably already talking too fast and it's about to get worse. So just if you literally can't understand me, just cool. Okay, I'm moving us away from the fashion conversation again here a little bit. Our main swaps are for books and toys, but we have hosted clothes swaps and all the same principles apply. So I was about to see a familiar face. I didn't know Jen was going to be here when I put this together, so this is now slightly creepy and I'm really sorry. But Jen, you're my hero. Let's carry on. So back in 2022, with a small team of friends, I started Devices Swap Shop. Since then, it's grown to welcome hundreds of people at each event, playing a role in connecting our community, as well as reducing waste and helping families. The aha moment that led me to the swaps was an initiative by a fellow Wiltshire sustainability person, Jen Gale. Jen ran this brilliant, she spoke about it earlier, as a social media challenge, I suppose you'd call it, but nothing new in 22. That's the year, 2022, by the way. And the idea was for everybody that took part to, yep. Oh, sorry. Can you? That's good. I could just talk a bit louder. Okay, okay. Going to be too loud now. Okay. Okay. And how does that just? Is that too far? Sorry, I really don't want to break anything. It's just creating, exactly. We're creating waste live for you. Yeah. Okay. Does that hear me? Well, it's too loud now. Okay, so we were talking about nothing new in 22, and what I really want to say about that is it was a transformative experience for me personally, a huge mindset shift that created a habit I've not broken significantly since. I very rarely buy anything new at all anymore, or at least not till I've exhausted the borrowing, renting, making, buying secondhand, etc. Only then do I come to buying something new, and it's easy to live like that for me now. So me and my couple of mates are thinking, how do we take this beyond an individual action? How do we facilitate not buying new things in our community, without being judgy about it? How do we make it easier for people to make that choice? And swaps are the answer. We're not telling people off or asking them to sacrifice anything, just to change the way that we do things. So instead of that linear take, make, waste economy, we're swapping and sharing. And we're normalizing that as a positive experience. And that's why I love the swap shops, because instead of only talking about the problems, we're inviting people to be part of the solution. We're modeling a little piece of what a lower carbon future might look like. People are there having a great time. The model we operate is super simple. Entry's free, there's no token system or requirement to donate anything in order to take something. We're open for donations the evening and early morning ahead of the swap. And then we lay everything out in an ordered way so it looks nice. And then the swap opens and folks can just come in and take whatever they want. The other reason I love the swaps is the co-benefits. As I said, our initial motivation was really around reducing waste and trying to gently change people's mindsets about consumption. But with the cost of living crisis, we can really see that the swaps are a huge help to families, hopefully without it seeming patronizing or stigmatizing, as our framing is, you are helping by reducing waste, not you are being helped by being given free stuff. There we go. So we set up our space with a sort of exit via the reclaim station where our volunteers count and weigh all of the outgoing items. These are our totals so far. Can't quite believe it when I look at those now. Yeah, I'm excited to keep growing them. Our first swap shop, we just had a gazebo in the marketplace, a couple of tables, books and games, sourced entirely from the group, just had to clear out when our kids weren't looking. I remember a child at that first swap saying to me, "Excuse me, how much is this?" And she's being like, "It's free, my love. And if you've got anything at home that you're done playing with, maybe bring it down for someone else to enjoy." And just watching their little brain like I think the simple concept of just sharing in this way can be hard for folks to get their head around at first. It's sort of commerce and capitalism. It's so ingrained in our culture. But now, Now that we've been doing this a little while, I do find I have to explain it less and less, which is awesome. So how do we make it happen? Alongside a small but dedicated gang of volunteers, the key to us making this a success has been partnerships. We're lucky to have the support of a couple of local churches who are proactive about community initiatives. Collaborating with St James's means we've had a venue and storage in between swaps, which is probably the biggest challenge of keeping a scheme like this going. We've been hosting seasonal plant and seed swaps at St Andrew's Church for years. We also work with the local family hub charity Spurgeon's, who use the event as an opportunity to reach out to families who might not be aware of their services. Chippenham Uniform Exchange come and join us on swap days, which helps us as we don't have to find storage in between swaps for the uniform, and they can top up their stocks with devices donations, and we give them a cut of the bucket as well, so that works well. And finally, Fairtrade Devices do the refreshments for us, which of course is absolutely essential. We all know volunteers are powered by tea. When we run close swaps in the evenings for adults, or a swish as they're sometimes called, we replace the tea with wine. Yay, wine. I'm glad I got a yay for the wine, good. And these can be really lovely social occasions. Like I know several people who've made lasting friendships with people they met for the first time at the swap, so it's fab. And swaps can happen on any scale. They could be part of a larger event, like our kitchen item swap shop happens alongside lots of other stalls, and a community meal called the Lovely Lunch. I found the kitchen swap shop particularly moving, actually, because you have people who often feel burdened by the amount of stuff they have to clear out, especially in bereavement clear outs, like a whole kitchen worth of stuff. And then you've got other people who are just starting out and haven't got anything to eat their dinner off yet. And we can put those people in the same room, no money changes hands, and we're solving for multiple problems at once. And no new resources being used, nothing's going to landfill, we're winning all the way down. Talking of smaller scale swap shops, there's a little one I made happen earlier this month for a seasonal. This is just at my daughter's primary school. And in terms of the work involved, I designed a poster and put up a clothes rail. And that was basically it. So pretty manageable, even just as one person. Schools are a great setting for swaps of this sort. You could do Christmas jumpers, book day costumes, and of course, school uniform. If you're maybe feeling jazzed about the idea of running a swap shop or know somebody that might be interested, do come find me afterwards for a chat. I'm always happy to talk about swapping things. I've actually produced a downloadable toolkit with all my advice on running swap shops, together with templates and for sort of documents and signage and stuff. I get asked the questions a lot, so I thought, I know, I'm going to make a toolkit. So that's available on my Substack and to download on Gumroad. Yeah, but do come find me after if you want to talk about it. This is our next event. If you want to come along, you'd be more than welcome. I could talk about swap shops all day, but you've got other marvelous people still to hear from, so I'm going to kind of wrap up here. To sum up, I think the conversation about living more sustainably can sometimes be too focused on individual actions and therefore becomes about sacrifice, what we need to give up, all the things you shouldn't be doing, flying, eating meat, etc., etc. And those sorts of shifts matter, absolutely. But the real answer to what can I do is to stop thinking of yourself as an I. The question is, what can we do? Being part of something larger than yourself, being part of a community project, then you're gaining something rather than giving something up. New friends, that warm glow that comes from knowing that you're helping. Being utterly horrified is a reasonable response to so much that's going on in the world right now, and no one person can fix those problems. But doing something useful, something positive where you are honestly helps. Like getting involved in your community is, in my experience, the best antidote to despair. I highly recommend it. Yeah, that's me done, I think. So if you'd like to get in touch, yes, they will appear, my details up there. Especially like it if you consider subscribing to my Substack, because it's all new. I need more friends. Yes, I think yes, thank you for listening.
My name is Chad Staddon. In my day job, I'm a professor of resource economics and policy at UWE Bristol. That means I spend most of my time teaching the next generation of resource managers. Quite technical stuff, quite a lot of fun, but that's not what I'm talking about today. Today's talk really comes from an event that I co-sponsored and co-hosted last year at Brisley in Bath, where we were talking about the recently concluded COP event and some of the implications of the COP event. And I went on a bit of a rant about resilience, because one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of the debates about sustainability, about climate crisis, about the challenges that we face as individuals, as families, as communities, is they can often be disempowering. We're presented with a wall of doom, climate doom, Trump doom, doom. And that can feel super disempowering. And I remember saying to Jane, as we started to think about how do we change the conversation and the narrative, there's a lot of great stuff that's going on in the face of all of this doom. So let's double down on that. Let's talk about agency rather than lack of agency. Let's be active rather than passive. So for the next 40 minutes or so, that's the space that and the conversation that I'd like to build and develop with you. There are about a dozen or so slides in this presentation, but I think I can move through the first half of them quite quickly because they're really framing slides that talk about the challenges we face. And it's the last few slides about agency and about activity that I think are really most valuable. So let me move through those slides fairly quickly with only a quick whistle-stop tour of some of those climate framing things we need to be thinking about as we think about resilience as a process of protecting ourselves, our families, our homes, our communities. Okay, 2 slides on climate. We know we're living through a period of climate extremes, even if you're as yet unsure about anthropogenic climate change. The empirical data, even from the last decade, shows us very clearly that we're experiencing extremes. Extreme heat is more frequent than extreme cold, but extreme cold is still possible. Extreme wet is followed by extreme dry, and we've definitely seen that in the last 24 months, arguably even in the last 12 months. In our region, in southern England, we've had heat waves, followed by Category 3 hurricane-type storms, Storm Eunice, followed by flooding, historic flooding from Storm Bert. I have an affection for Storm Bert because Bert was my father's name, although he didn't usually bring quite so much rain. We've had record rainfall over the last 12 months, but also record drought and dryness. So these extremes are not just happening, and they're documentable, they're happening one after the other. It's this dizzying whirlwind of climate extremes that are causing all kinds of impacts on food systems, on transport, on infrastructure, on well-being. There's property damage to think about, there's transport disruption, health impacts, and so on and so on and so on. And now I'd like to introduce a character in my personal journey who's helped me think a lot about resilience and about agency, about what we can do. And that's Mrs. Powell. You'll see this question 2 or 3 times in these slides. How is Mrs. Powell doing? That's not Mrs. Powell. I don't have a photograph of Mrs. Powell. But I met Mrs. Powell for the first time about 20 years or so ago when, where I live up in the Stroud Valleys, we had very, very significant rains. We lost power in the district, and I went up and down the terrace just checking with some of the older folks just to make sure they were all right and they had everything they needed. I knocked on Mrs. Powell's door. She was 90-something at the time. Now, alas, no longer with us. She answered the door cheerfully, and I said, Mrs. Powell, how are you doing? The water went out earlier today. Are you all right? And she chuckled and said, well, yes, I heard it was going to go out, and so I filled the bathtub. And because I've got a camp stove, I shall have my tea, and I've got some tins of meat for the cat, so we're okay. She says, I'll give you a ring if I need your help. Oh, and would you like a cup of tea? Mrs. Powell was a resilient person in the face of that challenge. We'll come back to Mrs. Powell. What can we do? Faced with heat, faced with drought, faced with rainstorms, faced with windstorms, possibly faced with ice storms. That's not out of the frame. A less frequently experienced extreme, but still possible in our climatic conditions. What can we do? The next few slides help us to think about different levels of resilience, starting with personal resilience. I think the first thing to double down on is don't panic, as the great Douglas Adams taught us. A few knowing chuckles. As the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy taught us oh so long ago, the first and most important principle is don't panic. Don't give in to the doom feelings. We may be experiencing an unprecedented rainstorm or an unprecedented windstorm or an unprecedented drought, but we can deal with it. With forethought and preparation, we can cope. So here's a few things that I started to note down as I was thinking about the kinds of handy helps that might be useful to share with you and talk about a little bit further. The first thing is, have you taken a moment to think through what the best course of action might be in likely situations? Just thinking about the transport network around Westbury, there are bound to be choke points. I don't know the town particularly well, but I do know that the land is uneven. There's high points and there's low points. That implies to me that in heavy rain events, there are bound to be routes that are probably best avoided, probably better alternatives than taking the routes that go down through low U-shaped type terrain. Similarly, during periods of high winds, you might want to think about those routes where there might be tree fall hazards or branch fall hazards. That requires just a little bit of thinking about what will I do if something happens, a climate event happens, a weather event happens. What's my plan B? Local resistance forums prepare, as part of their ongoing business, community risk registers. How many folks here know about the local resilience forum? A couple of folks do. All districts and counties have a local resilience forum. These are government-mandated organizations, usually staffed by a mix of civil servants, elected officials, and citizens, whose job is to think about what are we at most risk of, and what will we do about it if that risk comes to pass? If we have that heavy rainstorm, if we have that heavy windstorm, what resources do we already have to help deal with some of the potential impacts of a climate event? What do we need to get in? What do we need to think about acquiring by way of assets? One practical example, most of my work involves the water sector, everybody's favorite companies these days, the water companies. I do a lot of work with water companies. But I can tell you a good news story about your water company. Part of its resilience planning involves maintaining a fleet of water bowsers that are deployable on 60 minutes notice. That's part of the resilience, the water resilience planning for how they will try to maintain supply if supply gets interrupted. There's lots of ways supply can get interrupted. It can be interrupted by too little rain, but that's a drought situation, and you can see that one coming months in advance. So that doesn't tend to sneak up on us quite so much. But you can lose water services through storm situations, as we did in Gloucestershire all those years ago when I first met Mrs. Powell. All water companies, including Wessex, maintain a strategic emergency supply. And they actually rehearse how to deploy that supply quickly. And they think about things too, like priority access to that supply. A lot of us here are probably fairly well prepared, and we think that if the water is suddenly cut off, it's inconvenient, but we might have some supplies at home that will carry us through for a few days. But what about vulnerable people? As part of local resilience forums work, they think about something called the Priority Services Register. How many folks have heard of the Priority Services Register? Again, it's maintained by water companies together with power companies to think about who's most vulnerable in an emergency situation, who is priority for service if we need to start delivering water door to door because the water's gone out, or if we need to be thinking about warmth or lighting if power has gone out. Those decisions are made through the Priority Services Register, which is part of the Local Resilience Forum apparatus, which also involves emergency services, utility providers, local authorities. You can begin to see it's actually quite a large conglomeration of public and private sector institutions that are really trying to think through how do we respond to emergency situations. Anyone in this room can get involved in your local resilience forum. It's not a closed shop. If you want to get involved in your local resilience forum, just Google, I think it's called Swindon and Wiltshire Local Resilience Forum. Yeah, it's not just called the Wiltshire Local Resilience Forum, it's the Swindon and Wiltshire Local Resilience Forum. It's got a website, it's got some interesting resources on the website, and they've also got some contact details so you can actually get more directly involved in thinking about planning for resilience, planning for extreme events. Have some emergency contacts handy. Most of us have mobile phones. Our mobile phones are brilliant for storing things. I'm a little bit old school. I also have, with my mobile phone, a small bit of paper that's actually got the numbers for my wife, my daughters, a few other folks as well, just because I don't quite trust this lump of plastic and silicon not to fail just when I need it most. And I would hate to be the guy who says, oh, I'd call my wife, except I can't because the phone has failed and the number's inside the phone. So I've got a little bit of paper that's got that number on there. How many folks have prepared emergency supplies to help tide them across short or longer term climate events? I'm seeing a lot of folks give that kind of tentative body language, like, yeah, you know, that's something I've thought about, that's something I've done, or I put some ready meals aside, but I ate them last Christmas. That's something to think about. You know, that's when we're beginning to think about what happens if we lose power for a couple of days because of a storm Eunice or a storm Bert. Now we're actually talking about quite infrequent, unlikely events, but events that might happen nonetheless. And it's helpful to prepare yourself in advance by just having some basics ready so that you're not caught on the hop. You're not that person who races down to the Aldi and buys up all the loo roll. This is a uniquely British thing, by the way. I say this as a Canadian. Canadians don't think about loo roll first in emergency situations. I don't know why that is. Know how to turn off gas, water, and electricity if necessary. How many folks know how to do that? Most of us do. I learned very recently that it's worth actually just going and doing that periodically, because I went to turn my water off and the handle broke off, which caused a different problem. Fortunately, my water company came out fairly fast and replaced the stopcock. Point being that just knowing where the handles are isn't quite the same as knowing they work. So every now and again, go and just turn that water off. Make sure that handle is still loose and still workable and not frozen up. Turning off electricity can be a little bit easier. You just trip the main breaker, everything turns off. If you've got teenage daughters like I do, they scream and complain, then you can flick it all back on again. Gas is slightly harder. Most gas supplies are inside our buildings somewhere. Mine's actually in the garage. But if you root around, you'll find a stopcock that looks something like a water stopcock. But instead of turning lots of times around as it screws down, it will usually turn only through 90 or 180 degrees because it's an on-off, shut-off valve. And again, think about family, friends, and neighbors and help them become more aware and prepared. There's Mrs. Powell again. After the event where we first met, you know, a while later, we were talking about the event, and I was chuckling and saying I was really impressed that she had had the forethought, as soon as she heard that the water was going to be turned off, she had the forethought to just fill up the bath, because she said, well, basically, she said, I can put up with pretty much anything as long as I've got tea. And for tea, I need water, tea, and a camp stove. And that's fine. I'm sorted. And I said, you know, Mrs. Powell, that's actually quite amazing. Nobody else in the street thought about that. And she just kind of chuckled and she said, well, you know, dear, I'm part of the war generation. And we learned these things up close and personal during the war. I think a lot of that, that knowledge is being lost for generational succession reasons, but it can be recovered. It's not permanently lost. We can relearn these kinds of habits of mind that make us think, ah, I've heard the water's going to go out. What large receptacle do I have that already has a tap in it? Ah, right. 15 minutes later, you've got a small water reservoir that will tide you across the service interruption. A little bit harder, perhaps, with electricity, but it is not beyond wit and wisdom to lay in a small stock of torches, candles. When I was a child, we used to actually enjoy power outs because it was an opportunity to get the candles out. And my mum and dad would always take the opportunity then to tell ghost stories for some reason. Something about having the candles instead of the electric lights triggered ghost stories, but you know, treasured memories actually, but they were also resilience memories. Household resilience, going back to the emergency plan idea. Not as much fun as playing Jenga on a Friday night, but it's important that everybody knows to do what if. I've got 2 daughters and a wife. We all lead complex lives. Every day we go off in north, south, east, west, all kinds of different directions. And if I'm honest, I worry about that. You know, particularly when we have extreme weather, I worry that one of my daughters will get cut off by a flooded motorway or a canceled train. And I worry what we would do. So, I mean, if my family was here now, they would be groaning because I am actually sufficiently geeky about this to say, let's spend a Friday night playing what if. What if your train can't get you home? How are we going to deal with that? How would I even know that your train isn't getting you home? Oh, I'd telephone you. Oh, what would we do about it? Oh, you'd get in the car and come and get me. But could I? Could I come and get you? Would it be safe? Or might it be better for you to just go to your friends who's near where you're studying or working? And we actually try and rehearse scenarios. We don't do it too often. I don't want to push them too hard in this direction, but I think it is important to just practice and rehearse some of those what ifs so that if you ever encounter any of them, well, you've already thought what you're going to do in the circumstance. Of course, all our homes should have appropriate smoke, heat, and carbon monoxide detectors and fire extinguishers of the appropriate type, and we should test them regularly. I recently tested our fire extinguishers and realized it was too long since I'd last tested them, and one of them didn't have any pressure left, so you just pulled the handle and nothing happened. So I've replaced those. How many folks regularly have a look at their fire suppression detectors and equipment? Really worth doing, really worth doing. And it's worth being a little bit geeky about it. I've got little labels I put on smoke detectors. Smoke detectors and heat detectors, 2 different devices. You have smoke detectors in your house and a heat detector in your kitchen. Don't put a smoke detector in your kitchen, particularly if you have teenagers. They burn things frequently. On the other hand, you don't then have to separately test your smoke detector because you know it works on a daily basis. Jesting aside, we've got heat detectors in the kitchen, we've got smoke detectors elsewhere in the house. They need to be tested, and they also have limited life. They're only good for 5 to 10 years, depending on the exact type you're using. And they're also possibly powered only by batteries, or possibly they're what's called mains-connected battery backup devices. So if you just went down to B&Q or a local supplier and bought one, it's probably only battery powered. Those are perfectly fine. But building code when you're doing renovations or extensions requires mains-powered battery backup for, I think, fairly obvious reasons. But again, both kinds of devices do need to be tested. You need to feel confident that in the event that they actually need to shout at you because you've got too much heat or too much smoke, that they're actually going to work. So all of mine, I thought about putting a slide on this, but it just struck me as too geeky, even for me. I've got little pink labels on mine that show the last date I actually tested them physically and when they were actually installed. So I know when they need to be replaced. Our homes should have an emergency kit. We talked about that a few moments ago, and maybe a small one in the car. In my car, I've got a blanket, a liter bottle of water, some granola bars, and a power bank, so I can always charge my phone. To me, that feels like the minimum necessary in case I'm caught out. And don't forget about your pets. I've got 2 lovely rescue dogs, and if we're planning resilience for the humans in the house, we also need to think about the animals as well. By the way, if you're thinking about smoke, heat, and carbon monoxide detectors and fire extinguishers, most fire stations will actually help you with this. So you can actually get in touch with your local fire station and say, can you do an inspection of my house and let me know how fire safe I am? How many folks have done that already in the past? Some of us have. They will do this. This is not well advertised, but it is a service that fire stations will generally offer. They'll come in and kind of do an inspection and just look for fire risk in your house and give you some advice about how to deal with fire risk. A typical household kit could include means of warmth like blankets, or if blankets are too bulky, you can include space blankets. These are these Mylar type blankets. They're actually really effective at keeping us warm and fit in your pocket. You can actually carry one in your pocket. That's enough for an individual. Means of lighting, torches, candles, some bottled water. Although if you're storing bottled water, again, you need to be thinking about rotating your supplies. You can't just put some bottled water in the garage 30 years ago and then expect that it's not green and growing things by the time you need it. Easily prepared food and alternative means of cooking and heating. So in our household, we tend to lean into Nature Valley bars, but also tins of beans and things that we can heat with cans of sterno. You know, sterno is the sources of warming and heating that you usually find in chafing dishes at catered do's. It's a solid fuel product. It's very easy to store. It's not pressurized. You don't need a stove. You just need the sterno can to warm things up. Again, those food supplies will need to be rotated if you're carrying food supplies. Power banks for powering phones and torches. Key documents like passports or birth certificates or whatnot. I mean, what we do in my household is we just photograph them and we keep them on our phones. So we've got snapshots handy, just of the identity page, not of all the visa pages. That would be a bit boring. Spare eyeglasses and medication, really easy to forget. A first aid kit, which doesn't need to be bigger than a shoebox and really should only include things that you know how to use. There's no point including things in a first aid kit that you don't know how to use. I was looking at a friend's first aid kit a while back, and he had a product in the first aid kit called tushy pegs. How many folks here have ever heard of tushy pegs? You've heard the term, of course, but the product is what I'm after here. I didn't know this thing existed until I saw it. Tushy pegs is a product for replacing broken fillings. And I said to my friend, let me just ask you, if you or your wife broke a filling, would you know how to use this product to fix a broken filling? Really? I didn't know you had any dentistry training. That's amazing. In a first aid kit, in any emergency kit, there's only a sense in storing things you know how to use. We've talked about fire extinguishers before and also pet essentials. Now, the last couple of slides actually scale up. We've talked about personal resilience, that all-important message, don't panic. With knowledge, forethought, and preparation, you can cope with nearly anything. We've talked about our homes and our families, how we bring them into the conversation, even if they find it a bit annoying and boring, and Nobody really likes talking about what ifs until it happens. Then you wish you had, right? What about community resilience? Well, we've talked about local resilience forums, and I really encourage folks who are interested in resilience thinking and being part of the resilience conversation to Google Swindon and Wiltshire Local Resilience Forum, get connected to that community of conversation and practice, and see what you can bring to that conversation. Build community support by being involved in the local resilience forum and supporting your vulnerable neighbors, the Mrs. Powells who live in our communities. We live in communities increasingly where a lot of people are isolated. There's lots of ways of being isolated. Mrs. Powell was isolated by her age, but that's not the only way people are isolated in our communities. There's lots of ways that people become invisible. That worries me from a resilience point of view, because I worry that if the power is cut off, or if one of these climate events gets in the way of normal life, how will these folks cope? That's really easy in a way, because all of us live in communities where hopefully we have a capacity to go and knock on doors. Or if we see someone in the shop, we can pluck up the courage and basically say, I see you've bought all the toilet paper again. So you think it's going to rain. But engage with people who may be at risk of being isolated and vulnerable, and help them become a little bit more resilient. Advocate for change. Support climate adaptation plans and sustainable planning policies at all levels. This is where you can interact with Westbury Council in local planning. Every community has opportunities to improve community level resilience through clever design, clever landscaping, clever development. Or you can go in the other direction with landscaping, design, and development that is not resilience smart, not clever. We need to challenge climate stupid development, like building on functional floodplains. I live near what's called a Class 1 functional floodplain, which is a government way of classifying how floody areas are. I live near the Severn River, right? A few weeks after our historic 2007 floods that cut the city of Tewkesbury off for more than a week, you may remember those aerial pictures of Tewkesbury Cathedral surrounded by water. It's almost become a kind of a poster child for flood risk. Every time there's a flood, you see Tewkesbury Cathedral. Unfortunately, it's not the only such photograph, but it is one that's commonly and frequently used. A few weeks later, after the floodwaters had subsided, Tewkesbury Council approved a massive development on the functional floodplain over the head of objections about increasing flood risk by increasing the amount of impermeable surface. Water's pretty simple stuff. It wants to follow the law of gravity and it wants to go down. Good urban design and good urban management encourages water to do what it wants to do. Down, not across. To the extent that we allow our urban environments to become impermeable, we magnify risk. And that's where I think the interaction with local councils, maybe putting a bit of pressure on your mayor and councillors, comes in. We're under pressure to approve developments faster. We currently have a government that says it wants to get rid of the blockers, not the builders. And at one level, I think we can see what they're trying to do. But let's not at the same time throw away those necessary protectors and those necessary measures that are designed to perhaps speed up the development planning and approval process, but without getting rid of necessary checks and balances that will make us more vulnerable. And then events like Sustainable Resilient Westbury that brings us out today. This is the first time I've actually seen a community come together like this to actually have this kind of a conversation, talking through the day with people who are doing things in the adaptation space, in the sustainability space, That wonderful presentation from those students. I mean, what a take home that is. I want to go to that school. I wish I was young again and I could go to that school and have those teachers and do those things. I think events like this are critically important, but what's also important is what happens after today. The extent to which we take some of those messages from the various things you've heard out into the community and share them with your friends, your neighbors, your Mrs. Powells, and indeed perhaps keep up the gentle pressure on your local council, your local elected representatives, but also perhaps your, dare I say it, your members of parliament, to become part of that conversation. These challenges are not going to go away. I definitely don't want people to think that that climate crisis means we are completely disempowered and we ought to just give up because the challenges are just too great. I don't think that's true. I think what is true is that we are as vulnerable as we allow ourselves to be. But pushing back vulnerability and building resilience means doing some of these things that I've talked about in the last little while. That's it. Thank you.